Okay, now there's just one or two bits and pieces of information there. Um, whilst I've mentioned several times already tonight, 1990, this is a series of interviews recorded in 1990. Some of the stories go back much, much further. The people who interviewed were getting on in years at the time when the interviews were done. So we're covering a span of some getting on for 70 or 80 years of life in this village. Um, so providing my machinery will work, so it's forward, that should be there. No, it doesn't want to carry on. Right. So I'm just going to quickly, because the video doesn't introduce people as to who they are and what they did in the village, I'm just going to briefly touch on three people that speak on the video, two in the first one and one in the second half. This is Bill Lambert. Bill Lambert was very much a gentleman in the village. He lived in the village, as far as I know, the majority of his life. He was married. They had the number 1 Hesketh Road as their home for many, many years. He was chairman of the Chestnut Group. He got involved with helping run many of the village events, some of the early dances. He was certainly a very important person in Yardley for many decades. And his story includes telling the story of the village hall, which is there behind him in that photograph. I will also show you Mrs. Annie Shakeshaft. Mrs. Shakeshaft, Annie, to everybody that knew her, lived in the cottage in the High Street, which I trust you can identify from that. The cottage to the right, or the 3-story cottage to the right, was known as the Chattery. It's where Eliza lives now, Eliza Netz, formerly the home of Mr. Rowlands and people like that. But it was also originally a village bakery. But that's a picture of Mrs. Shakeshaft stood beside a most amazing sign, which they found many years after. Her husband was Dennis. This is George Shakeshaft, his father's business, which Dennis continued. But you can see from the sign there that he was the builder, the decorator, and the undertaker. And there are many stories. Some are on our Village History Group website, others that are available, of the work they did, the work that George did, and to a degree Dennis carried on as a jobbing builder. And I know a lot of the work around the village is his handiwork. So that's just a little bit of background to Mrs. Shakeshaft. By the time the interview was done, her husband Dennis had passed away, but she was a very passionate person about our village, having lived in it all her life, and I'm sure you will enjoy her story. And Mrs. Elizabeth Wood. Now, I've got to hold my hand up and say I don't know a lot about Mrs. Wood. She was, again, a very influential in the WI, probably the Chestnut Club as well. I think she was president and possibly a president of the WI, the county or whatever. She lived up Moor End Road. But I personally, yes, I knew her when she lived in the village, but I've never really got to know her or the background to us. Had Brenda been with us tonight, I'm sure she would have filled us in, unless Chris and Barbara would like us to add anything at that point. Sorry, I'm putting you right on the spot there, but...
No, Robert, I think the only thing that I remember is that she was president of the WI for years and years.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Barbara. That's lovely. Yes, I mean, that's thank you. Your knowledge is similar to mine, so that's good. Okay, thank you. She actually lived at 27A Moor End Road, where Sheila Francis now lives, on the left-hand side. So that's really the three people that most of the main interviews are done are on this video. But the video itself, I mean, I will run it and without breaking, unless somebody's got a problem and we actually need to just stop and sort of put things right. So hopefully this will go forward.
The village of Yardley Gobion stands at the southern end of Northamptonshire, roughly halfway between the county town and the new city of Milton Keynes. Once it was a small, self-contained village with a number of shops, farms and pubs nestling amongst the houses, but today it is largely a dormitory from which people travel to go to their work. In older times, it was a hamlet in the parish of East Perry, or Pottersbury, and one of 18 villages within the bounds of Whittlewood Forest, which was created by Henry I. A question often asked is, how did it get its name, or why is it called Yardley Gobion? Well, the name Yardley meant a clearing in woodland from which yards or spars were obtained for sailing ships. But what of Gobion? This name comes from a Northampton family who were granted land here in 1160, and who apparently held land stretching from the present Yardley House, across Moor End Road, and right through the area now built upon with more modern houses. The younger sons of the Gobion family were often in trouble, though, being accused at various times of murder, assault, theft, and trespass, so perhaps we are not too sorry that the male line died out after approximately 200 years. Here you go.
Ladies and gentlemen, We have many events this afternoon with a medieval theme, not least the It's a Knockout merry-go-round, there'll be horse and cart rides, flowers, many other things as well, the fire brigade and the St John ambulance. Also there's stalls, village hall stall, and there are many things actually in the village hall itself, so plenty to entertain you through the afternoon, but the children's fancy dress about to begin.
How many times are you going to go in the bounce house? Is little Robert going with you as well?
keep up with the old village, especially what's going on. We like to know what's going on in the village, especially the new people that come in. We like them to join in with the activities, if possible, to keep the things going, really. So we don't want the old things to die out. I'd like to see the old May Day come back with the old maypole, you know, and then the children, you know, dancing with the old maypole and that. It used to be the old Tommy Cadd was in the village then. He was the old maypole man. He used to have the old pig's bladder on the old stick and whop them along with that, knock them along with that.
Yes, I've heard of Mr. Cadd.
Yeah. He's a character in the village. Yes.
Was he also involved in the Morris dancing and so on?
Oh yes, all the old dances and that. Yeah. Oh, I think some of the older people in the village, you know, that used to do the maypole dance. And I think they would love to have a go at it, you know, to try, you know, if the young ones done it, I think they would then, after they'd had a go round, I think they would like to have a go round. I feel sure on that.
That would be worth seeing.
Yeah,
worth doing.
I think they would do it if they was, you know, several of them was asked. They'd enjoy it.
That would be good.
Yeah.
To see.
Yeah.
And good fun as well.
Yeah, probably want a few bags of wind to give them some wind, you know, puffing.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our sport. I think it will be started. Marvellous.
We were planned. Take it. Well done. Well done.
fight, a marvellous fight. Mrs. Black won by a short neck. Now, gentlemen, don't let the ladies put you to shame. Look at the cheeks. Don't lose the eggs, folk, we've only borrowed them. And this year's winners of the Shield and the Cup, Green at 131. Well done, Green, that's marvellous.
It's the same with the school. I mean, you can't compare what they do now to what they did then. Although scholastically, they did very well. I mean, the scholarships that were got, the 11 plus passes, and there was always 4 or 5 every year got through. Whatever.
Very good.
Yeah.
It's always had a high standard.
It's always had a high standard, yeah. As I say, there was, how many headmasters did I know? One. There was Mr. Jones, Mr. Harvey, Mr. Baker, Mr. Dawson, Mr. Brooke. 5. And of course, you see, Mr. Brooks, I mean, when the new school came along then, of course, there was a deputy head and more teachers. So I think, I don't know how many they have now, but when I was asked on the managers, there were 7. Yeah, with Mr. Brooks and the deputy. Plus someone to look after the children when they were out at play and look after them if they were sick and so on and so forth. Everybody knew everybody and in the village. And if anybody was wanting anything, I guarantee somebody would find out and they'd have it and be looked after. It was marvellous really. The comradeship in a way, I don't know what else you'd call it. And there was a Mrs. Leach who lived in the house where Mrs. Well, Cliff Brothers, you know. We always called it the Castle House, my boys did.
Oh, I know.
You know where I'm living? Stonebank, that's right. And she and her family were marvellous to the village, they were, really were. And if anybody was ill, she'd be there. There were some marvellous people there in the village in those days.
How do you think the village is today with so many new people and new houses in comparison?
Well, as I say, you can't really compare it, I don't think, to be quite honest. You see, there are so few houses, in a sense, and you take 300 people to now, what is it, about 1,300, I think, something like that. I mean, you just can't compare it.
Well, just a little compact village, a small little village, only just the one straight through and right to Moor End and the way out to Northampton, which was very good. There always was plenty of bus services then, which of course we don't get now. But it was very quiet. There was no, everybody knew one another, and you knew when Mrs. So and so was going to down Northampton and what she was going to buy and everything. It was all all very friendly, and well, of course it is now all friendly, but the newcomers come in the village, of course they don't know the old people so much, do they?
Sure.
And of course it's a job to mix with the old times. And
well, it is, that's
you
right.
have to bring the new ones up to it. It would be very nice if we could get the newcomers in the village too mix up with the old people. I don't say they're not all old people in the village, but they term themselves as village people, don't they?
That's right.
Holly and ivy, holly and ivory. I hallowed it with a bramble bush. Ivy, sing ivory. I wreathed it with a pale knife, and a bunch of green holly and ivory. Green holly, I set it home in a walnut shell. Ivy, sing ivory. I flushed it with a needle and thread. A bunch of green holly and ivory, green holly. I windowed it with my handkerchief. Ivy, sing ivory. I sent it home in a tingle green hat. A bunch of green holly and ivory, green holly and ivory. The carter brought a curling whip. Ivy, sing ivory. The whip did pop and the whip so. And a bunch of green holly and ivory.
The Second World War affected Yardley Gobion in much the same way it affected other villages. But on the night of the 20th of March 1944, the village had a very lucky escape, a tragedy that nearly was a catastrophe. At 11 o'clock that night, a Wellington bomber based at Ossington in Nottinghamshire was on a training flight with 8 Canadian crew members on board.
Particular night, we hadn't had an air raid warning or anything, which was unusual. It was on Monday night actually. Most unusual. And I was knitting a pullover, and I got one more cable row to do, and I thought, oh, well, I'll just finish that. And then no sooner said that than there was the old, what we used to say, chuff, chuff, here he comes again. German aeroplane. And I sat and I listened, opened the stairs door, ready to dive up to the boys' bed. And on my stairs door was just there was a red, absolutely red reflection. And I thought, oh my God, what's happened? Something on fire. And of course it was the plane, reflection from the plane. Well, after that, it didn't seem seconds, but it must have done, because he apparently went round, up Mount Pleasant, came down and caught one of the hayricks in the farmyard. He was trying to get down to the canal. There was nothing there. He could have got down just like that. But there was one almighty bang, and of course that was it. And I was just prepared to go upstairs, and Mr. Warren from across the road, he was at my door. Get me the boys quick, he said. They can come under our Morrison shelter, because, I mean, we didn't know what it was. So he took my two across to their house here, next to you. And the people that kept the coffee pot, then she was just coming through my gate to say, come over to us. It's a little bit further away. We'll bring the children. So I said, well, I've already gone to Mr. Warren's. In that instant, somebody was at my gate. Can you go to that standpipe and fill some buckets of water? Bring as many buckets as you can find. So with that, of course, out I went. No sooner got outside the gate than the fireman come. Oh, he said, Mrs. Shakespeare, isn't it? I said, yes. He said, get any papers or anything that you want, because we can get no water from the hydrants, he said. He said, and there's lumps on your roof when it wasn't. Honestly, Red, we never meant to burn. He said, bring them out. So well, I nipped upstairs, got the box with the insurance policies in, what money I'd got, 2 or 3 clothes, slung them on my arm, and away I went over to Mrs. Warren's with them. Went back to the thing with the buckets, and at the coffee pot, she came out, Mrs. Daniels, as she was, and I said, do you mind standing there while I run home and get some buckets? She said, oh no, go along, my dear. And where I went, come back with 3 buckets. And I stood there, I think, for 3 hours, filling buckets. And first, everybody was rushing to pick the buckets up to take into the farmyard, you see, try and help the farmer. And anyway, that was that night. I went back to Mrs. Warren's, because it was daylight by then nearly. And as morning came, I suddenly thought, oh my poor chickens. And I went round home and left the boys in with Mrs. Warren. And I said to Molly, all those poor chickens are all be burnt to bits as well. I ran out and let them all out, yours and mine. So with the hens and the ducks, and when it was light, I went across to see what happened. And the farmer said, "What are you looking for, missus?" I said, "Well," I said, "all my animals are, they're all here." And they were all in a big, because we got a great big pen. They were all in this big pen waiting for the breakfast. So I fed, come back, got my stuff and fed them. And took the basket, that we took a little raffia basket for eggs. Every blooming one had laid ducks, chickens as well. It was really, really funny. Those things are funny. Because the farmer looked over the edge and he said, "Good grief, what have you got there?" I said, "Yes, everyone's laid." So he said, "Well, you know what to do then when you want your hens to lay." So he said, "What about breakfast?" I said, "Here you are then." So we took several of these eggs off the top. Of course, away I went back. But I thought it was really funny. Because it was, I mean, there were bullets going off, because they got a lot of bullets, you see, that were going off, bang, 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 bang. Well, I've got two up there, two of the cases rather. And of course by morning, I mean, the place was swarmed with airmen. They'd come, I should imagine, I don't know, I should think they came from Hayford. They come from somewhere handy anyway, and they, of course, they tidied up, collected bodies, and were picking up bits, and it was dreadful really. And then they came round with, eventually got rakes and were raking, you know, to find, well, anything that had come off them, I presume. And I know Grandma, after they cleared up, they found quite a bit of money. That must have come out of their pockets, and that was collected up and sent to the Airmen's Benevolent Fund, because we didn't know who they were and where they come from, so not for a long time. And then we did eventually find out what country they were, and that's how their names happened to be put in the new, because we got a new reading desk as it happened, and it was put at their names, well, not their names, but the date and everything was put on there. Then we had a service out here under the trees here for the village, and the chapel minister took that, because our vicar went, because they were both from Perry at that time, Mr. Whitehouse, the chapel man, and Mr. Richards, vicar, of Pottersbury.
Well, that, as I said, was the natural break. It wasn't quite the natural break. It's not quite halfway, but it, I hope, gives an impression, particularly that last interview of the, as Mrs. Sheikh Shah said, the tragedy that was averted, but still, unfortunately, the 8 airmen lost their lives. So I believe there's 2 or 3 questions that are in the chat, or at least they have been, but maybe, well, no, they're comments really, sorry. I haven't looked at these until just this second. So, gosh, there were so many more trees up Hesketh than there are now. It's very true, yes. The estate, when it was built in the late 60s, had a lot of trees built, red willow trees planted, and not all have survived. And Helen made the comment, there's so few vehicles. Well, that's true. I saw that red vehicle, a Ford Escort, batting through the Hesketh Road as though sort of, no, he wasn't on a racetrack, but certainly wasn't impeded by the great large number of parked vehicles that are obviously on Hesketh Road, and now obviously our High Street, Moor End Road, any road, there's full up with vehicles. Has anybody got any questions at the moment? Because I'm certainly quite willing to take them now. And if not, I will attempt just to set the second part of the video progressing. We've been sort of 3/4 an hour. If people want to have a short break just to refresh glasses or anything, you're more than welcome to. How's everybody feeling? I appreciate most of you are muted because we were getting some feedback and some noises. So Helen kindly muted you all, so anyway, but are you happy to carry on?
Can I just say one small thing you might be interested in knowing? The pictures of the maypole and the children dancing around the maypole, that maypole is still up in the school, and this summer they're going to put all new ribbons in it, because some of the old ribbons are frayed and gone and what have you, and it's all going to be completely new ribboned. I don't know what verb I can use for that, but redone and reused again. So that tradition is still ongoing. which it has been, you know, I don't know how old that maypole is, to be quite honest. I mean, it was there when my kids first went to school. I don't know whether it was there when Barbara and Chris's children went to school there.
Yep, it was there.
I actually don't know how old it is. I don't know whether Linda knows how old it was or how far it goes back. But anyway, it's still alive and they're going to put new ribbons on it.
Good.
It was there when my daughter was at school, and that was back in 1976.
Okay, right, good. Yeah. It's doing well, really, because it used to get carried down from the school to the coffee pot field.
Yeah, the recreational field, yeah.
That's right, and it was a devil to carry because the base weighs an absolute ton. And it took about 3 guys to carry the jolly thing because it wouldn't fit in any vehicle. So it's been up and down Eskith Road several times. It had a bit of a checkered history, but it's still alive and kicking.
Just as we were viewing that, and of course I have viewed that video now on a couple of occasions, and I know some of you this evening with us have seen it before, but the for example, the football club playing their opening game of football, or at least, sorry, the game of football that was featured fairly early on in the video is of course on the coffee pot field. But I think the very interesting thing to notice from that is that virtually every hedgerow, every tree had a considerable number, every hedgerow had a considerable number of trees. So we're probably still back to some of the elm trees that were in a sad way by that stage, but we're still dominating the landscape. For those of you who noted, I must admit, I took the opportunity just to go and check with Helen that we were functioning well. Elm Green, there was a picture of a lady and her daughter on a horse. That was Sarah Emmons and her daughter, I have to name a moment ago. But the Elm Green was completely bare. There was obviously no pump, no signpost, no trees, and it just hit me then that that's quite a blank green that it was in those days. I think we hear a little bit more about Tommy Tad and the Silver Band and the Morris dancers, but of course the headmaster that was there on the playing field with the children was Mr. Brooks, who was a character in his own right. I think, well, as Mrs. Shakespeare said, as a school manager, they had good results from the teaching that the children were given. So it's good to see. Okay, right. Well, I shall again attempt to carry on.
And Mr. Whitehouse took the service, and I don't think ever, heard anybody preach as he preached that day, that man. Marvellous. But it was marvellous, and all the village rallied round. And he had been going round for some time because they were walking across the green from Pottersbury before we got the barrow. And I sort of followed it round, evidently. Yes, but well, of course, it was something that had to happen. They saved the village, but not themselves.
I couldn't tell you when it paid. It went to some years back now. Yardley Gobion Silver Band on it. Then it went Yardley Gobion Pottersbury. The two joined together. Then the people that were who we've been talking about, the Swains, they played a big active life into that. Although they was, we say, not quite, but they was quite the band's people in the village. The Swains, And my father, he was a drummer in the band. That's going back many years back now. And there used to be a little photograph used to hang in the coffee pot just inside the door with all the old Yardley Gobion band on it. And my father was there with the drummer, but we never seemed to know where that picture has gone. That was a real picture, that was a real good one. Very going back right when it was the old Yardley Gobion band, when they was all more or less Yardley Gobion people. And the old pack horse, you see, we've lost that now, haven't we? Well, it was what we call a quiet pub then. You could go in there, you'd talk all about your old village life and all that sort of business. And, marvellous cellar, the beard always come up cold, and beautiful. Yeah. You've got the old, real old-fashioned pub, the little old dining room where you can sit and have a chat and smoke, and then one room for the games room and one for your bar. You know, the old Skittles and so far as going. It was the old pub in the village. That was. Can't quite remember how many. There was quite a few in the village. You see, one down the what they call down the Grafton Road. You see, which we used to be called the slaughterhouses. One of those houses for the public house. But they used to be the slaughterhouses for a big house which now stands on the corner where Mr. Odell's used to live. Butchers. That used to be the big butcher's house there, which is the old north, south, east, and west. Odell's sausages are the best. That was the advert for his sausages. And the slaughterhouse used to be down the Grafton Road.
And there was somewhere down there where you could get a drink in there?
That's right, you get a drink, yeah. And the wharf, they always reckon you could get a drink at the wharf. That was, I think, practically every village had their little old local where you could get a toddy to a beer, didn't they, if you knew where to go.
Yardley Gobion Institute started in December 1927, and Miss Hilda Townsend told me that someone approached her and she'd got to get 25 people to join, and she went round the village knocking on doors, and people said, oh, you'll never get Conservatives and Labour, church and chapel to sit down together. Anyway, she got 25 people, and in December 1927 they started. I have got a list of the original members, and Mrs. Isabel Smith, who is the blacksmith's widow, she was one of the original members. So we go on from there. And in 1987, it was our Diamond Jubilee. And that's when I resigned. I felt that I'd done enough, and my health wasn't too good, and of course I'd lost my husband, and of course he was a great support, and you can't do quite the same when you're on your own. So that's the WI.
Thank you very much indeed.
Next door was an old man called Bill Atkins, and I think we'd been here 2 days when he leaned over the fence and said, I hope you won't be offended, but shut all your windows tonight. This was a Monday, because on Monday nights the night cart comes round, and he said you get a nasty smell, because of course there was no sewer in the village. We had a septic tank in the front garden because we were told the sewer was coming, so we put it as near to the boundary fence as possible. But most of the people in this area had got buckets in outbuildings, privies, which were emptied once a week. So old Bill thought he'd better tell me about this, and I was very grateful to him. There was one old lady who lived in where the Uptons live now. There's some cottages, and she lived in one of those cottages. And she said to me, you know, in the old days, if you wanted to go to Northampton, you walked to Castlethorpe and took the train. And there was a carrier's cart which went in once a week to Northampton, but apart from that, you walked to Castlethorpe.
Today, much of Yardley's history is preserved in its road names. Eastfield Crescent and Brownsfield Road are more obvious references to names of fields around the village, but one road name points to a rather more romantic story. In 1463, the daughter of the Duchess of Bedford, who lived at Grafton Regis, apparently used to meet her lover under this very oak tree, just on the edge of Yardley Gobion. It is known today as the Queen's Oak, because the lady in question was to become the first Queen Consort to be named Elizabeth, as the man she used to meet under the oak tree was none other than King Edward IV. Their courtship and even their marriage on May the 1st, 1464 were kept secret, but soon all was revealed, and a lavish coronation ceremony took place in Westminster Abbey in 1465. And where to find her name in Yardley Gobion? Well, her maiden name was Woodville, Elizabeth Woodville.
Well, the old social club up the village, there was what they call the old social, that was sold, and some part of the money with that was used to build the old village hall, plus a grant from the South Northamptonshire Council, providing that the village hall was built through voluntary labour. And that was built started in 1952 by quite a team of voluntary labour, and that took us approximately 15 months to build it, and it was opened in 1953.
Did you have, therefore, an official opening, presumably?
Oh yes, yes. It was all opened officially by Mr. Harris. He was the architect, who then resided in the village. Of course, he's left the village now. And Mrs. Rigby, she opened it, who then lived at Cosgrove. Oh yes, it was quite a big opening, quite a big ceremony to open it. Yes.
And it's always been used for all kinds of village events?
Oh yes. At that time, of
another.
course, there was nothing in the village, so I say for anywhere to go, and apart from the old school, which is now, as you know, built into houses, so of course this has had to play a big part of the village life. With the old fashion music hall, you know, and all that sort of thing, concerts, and the Women's Institute's putting things on, and everybody.
Yes, can you think of other groups that use it then?
Well, of course, the Chestnut Club, they use it now, you see, which use it for quite a long while now. Yeah.
They've been quite a mainstay of the village hall, I should think.
Well, they have, yes.
The main supporters.
Yes,
in some ways,
yeah. And they started in 1961. So that's been going quite a long time, of which, of course, at the moment I'm chairman. So that plays a big part in our life for the old people, really, or I should say senior citizens, you know. we have
occasional trips and things.
Oh yes, we have. We hold our monthly meeting in the village hall every second Tuesday of the month. We then have 7 outings per year, including one outing to. We generally go to the Pickwick at Toaster for a Christmas meal. But all the organisations we get up with are self-contained. You know, we don't get any help from anywhere. So all we rely upon is raffles and such likes which we put up, tombolas and such likes in the village. So of course we've got some good friends in the village which do really look after us.
It's still very well supported as a club.
It is. We've got approximately 52 members at the moment. Of course our members, as you know, we're all senior citizens and that. We keep losing quite a few, which is very sad, but that is another thing. We don't get the older people coming in the village, you know, the senior citizens in the village, the newcomers, they don't seem to want to join. You know, we try to get them together. Well, they think, we're just that little bit too young or something to join, but we'll be very pleased if we get, the elder couples that do come in the village, the new ones, to join the club. That would be a great help to us. Nobody seems to come forward to want to join, which is very sad because it's, if we can keep the number up, it's very good for us, because if you go on a coach outing, you can't go with 20 or 30, you still want the coach full to make it pay. So You know, we like to keep our membership up to about 50, 53. Yes.
And do you see the village hall that you helped build carry on supporting the Chestnut Club, or might they be tempted away to another venue?
Oh no, no. I think the Chestnut Club definitely will stick to this village hall. Definitely.
Well, that's good.
Probably some organisations might change to the new venue up in the school, but I don't know. Probably the play group. It may do that. They may get it a little cheaper. I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know, but definitely the Chestnut Club won't change. We stick to this. The old ones helped to build it, so I think they want to support it, don't they?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's very good. Very good.
Many of you may know this centre has been in progress for since 1983 was when it was first suggested. 1984 was when the Yardley Gobion Recreation Centre Committee was first founded, and we've been working, various members of the committee, past and present, have been working very hard on the project ever since. And I think from the outside you can see that we've achieved a very great deal. And to coin a phrase, when you go inside, you won't see nothing yet. I'd like to thank, as I say, all the members of the committee who have helped in the past and all the ones who are on the committee at the moment. The trustees who have had the confidence in the members of the committee to put their names behind this. All the charity organisations and the councils who have given us money. Obviously they would only give us money from the hard work put in by the committee members. And finally I'd like to thank Linda Mason, who has been a stalwart, leading us through the legal complications that a project like this always entails. We're not charged a penny piece. I'd like to ask you, Linda, to officially. Right, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to officially open the bar, and this is not going to be a drinking club as a lot of people said. This is obviously the thing that's going to hopefully pay for a lot of the running of the centre, but it's not the main reason for the centre being here. So Linda, I'd like to officially ask you to pull the first pint.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
We always do it 4 times in Yardley, Linda.
Do you? Oh, I'm glad I'm Harry's solicitor, not Barney.
Put it on the counter afterwards.
Oh, really?
You haven't got a nice top on it.
I think the other trustee wants to drink the first pint. Where is he?
Yeah.
Who's here?
Oh, the trustee, John.
Come
have the first pint.
Who is the other trustee?
I just drink to the health of you all and to the committee for this wonderful recreation centre and all the work that they have done over the last 4 or 5, 6 years. Thank you very much. All of you will support this. All of those that are not here, all those that are here, come and join and use the facility. That's what it's here for. It's for you.
A mixed bag, to say the least, of life in the village in 1990. Obviously, with some of the stories from many decades before that. But I haven't actually checked the chat. I don't think there's anybody else has posted anything there. Thanks to Mike for trying to point me in the right direction. Sorry, I've just read his comment. Okay, I won't repeat that. Right. So sorry if that disturbed your viewing of that second part of the video, but I don't think we missed much, but it was just a break in the continuity, which was, I wouldn't say completely my fault, but it certainly was technology. Let's blame that. Any points, any comments, any thoughts about what you've seen tonight before we sort of wind the session up? Most people, I think, are muted, so if you would like to speak, please either just raise your hand or unmute yourselves, which you can obviously do quickly if necessary. Right. Okay, well, I've just picked up a couple of points which I was going to just mention in passing. Bill Lambert referred to the social club, which many of you may or may not have realised was originally the very lovely red brick building, which is now something like 27, possibly 25, no, 27 Moor End Road. It's still there, but it has now been extended literally in every direction, and there's major works going on there at the present time. So that was the old social, built for the village by the Duke of Grafton as this is the first meeting place for villagers. This is obviously as opposed to the church and the chapel, which were really the only other buildings, along with the school, which had a community use. Then obviously the village hall, which was, as Bill Lambert said, was built over a period of 15 months, and I think opened in about 1953 or 4, virtually coincided with the coronation, and hence there was for many years the picture of the newly crowned queen on the wall of the village hall. The recreation centre was not obviously dreamt of until 1981, some 9 years before the film was made. But it took probably the best part of 10 years, A, to raise funds, and B, to encourage the village to accept the fact that it needed a second meeting place. For a number of years, the old school had become a meeting place. I remember our daughters going to playgroup there, and I'm sure many of you here will remember that evening, that building being used for those type of events. But that was really 3 smaller rooms, 3 old classrooms, which weren't suitable for anything other than small meetings and the like. The village hall was the only hall with a stage. Mr. and Mrs. Covington, particularly Mrs. Covington and her son Christopher. The stage curtains is another story which I could go into for a great length of time, but they were not available. And the recreation centre, after a great deal of, we used to use the hall for our events, for our fundraising events, and the managing to get the wonderful curtains out of the tin trunk that was kept under the village hall stage was something that we achieved, but it wasn't after a great number of visits to Mrs. Covington and to her son Christopher. So, but then obviously the recreation centre was built not quite as the village hall was. The village hall obviously built a prefabricated type building. The recreation centre had a steel frame underneath and brick, which was all done. The brickwork was all done voluntarily. It was a tremendous community project that from the word go. Okay, any further points, questions, comments from anybody this evening? Right. I know Graham kindly emailed, Graham Brack emailed me some little while ago, and I never did respond to it, but you know what I'm like with email, Graham. But you were making inquiries on behalf of your daughter and son-in-law that live now in Prospect Court as to how close that was to the actual position of the aircraft crash. It's pretty close. The actual site where the adjacent two sort of 1960s houses, one was scored for a long time, 007, and the other one, Lyndhurst, was built. That was an orchard, part of number 17 from memory. Now, that orchard was obviously affected by the events of that evening, and there was certainly the farmyard where Prospect Court now is, would be where the hayricks were, which is where the plane clipped the roof and then clipped or fell into those hayricks, hence the big fire. But Mrs. Shakeshaft's story is pretty amazing. There is another account of that evening on our Village History Group website by her, I believe, nephew, I think is the right term. Brenda was here, I know she would put me right. That story is told in a document within our website. And at that stage, he was living in Pottersbury, and when Mrs. Shakeshaft referred to them coming up from Pottersbury, this plane had obviously been circling for some time in distress, which is what alerted the people of Pottersbury to come and see what happened, and obviously what they found was not good. There is now online a report of that aircraft flight LN181, all the details of all the airmen, where they were eventually buried because their bodies were taken back to Canada where they'd been buried. You know, yes, the village that night had an immensely amazing lucky escape because that had come down on houses within the village. Mrs. Shakeshaft refers to the fire beginning to get a hold in the thatch roof of her cottage, which obviously didn't catch either the fire brigade or their own efforts with water from the standpipe. The standpipe was on the corner of the coffee pot there, which was all part of the original water supply to the village, served by the water tower out on Moor End Road. There were other standpipes in the High Street and at Moor End Road, but that water supply was obviously not great. I'm surprised they didn't actually think about using the canal, but that may have been just an impossible trudge in October across wet muddy fields.
Bob?
Yes.
The airmen were actually buried at Broadwood Cemetery in Surrey.
Okay, in that case, it's the right. You're correct. Thank you, Chris. I've got pictures of all that.
I can't remember it, but we've got the full details.
Yeah.
Of the graves and everything in the archive.
But certainly their remains were collected by the military at that time, or by the nation.
They were collected by the military.
Yeah. Sorry, my mistake. I certainly have seen pictures only these last couple of days of each of the gravestones with their inscriptions, and then of course there is the plaque that was added to the wall in the churchyard commemorating that event. Okay. Well, I hope that's given you a little bit of an insight into life in the village only 30 years ago, but it's surprising how many things have changed. The time of that video was just after the bypass had opened, and the High Street had become a very quiet and peaceful place after many, many years of endless traffic rumbling through. It's now a chicane to drive through the High Street. It certainly wasn't in those days, and if anybody dared park a vehicle, you had a queue back to, well, I was going to say to Grafton and to Old Stratford. It's not quite as bad as that, but you thought twice about placing a vehicle on the High Street in those days, and the traffic was pretty relentless through the village. particularly when problems happened with the M1 or the A5, and that was then the diversion route. But those of you who now live on the high street, I know some of you do, just be thankful that the noise probably goes fairly quiet until the early hours when the boy racers have gone home, and most vehicles don't restart again until 5 o'clock in the morning. But in those days, it was endless, as the A508 is today.